Hello everyone. Today we are going to be reading the Legbeard story they posted up on the Moonhorse Story subreddit. So it's kind of a bit of a semi-fan fiction because this was a real girl I met in middle school. Her name was Brianne and she was a terrible friend. Do not recommend. She wasn't actually a Legbeard though, I kinda just did that because I wanted some really weird petty revenge on her. I'm not a very angry person. But she actually pisses me off. She's the one person I know, and you'll see as I start reading this that I have very good reasons as to why I hate her. But let's just get right into it. Like most Legbeards, I met her in middle school. A little backstory on me: I had no friends except for one girl named Georgia. We had met in kindergarten, and our houses were close enough together that even when we went to different elementary schools, we could continue our friendship. I wasn't bullied so much as ignored when I was younger. People didn't mind talking to me, but just long enough until someone else came along to talk to them. Therefore, I really wanted to make friends once middle school started. I found Georgia again. We were a good pair. I managed to bull rank well enough to join the group. In retrospect, none of us shared any interests. They all liked anime and drawing. I'm more into YouTube and writing. There was about 7 people in the group total, but I'll do a quick character summary of the people I remember and are important to the story. We have Jennifer, who's very quiet and sweet girl. Georgia, who's very forgiving and kind of like the organizer around the whole group. There's me, who tends to be the more confident and stronger in the group. And then there's Brianne, who's the terrible friend and the newly named Legbeard. And I'll be perfectly clear here, everybody sucks in middle school. But Brianne was really bad. I don't know what it takes to be 12 years old, 5'6", and 300 pounds, but that's what she appeared to have accomplished. I'm not exaggerating when I say the walker shook when she walked past. Again, middle schoolers are obnoxious, but most kids still knew how to avoid black lipstick and neon green belly tops. I'm hesitant to even call them crop tops because the shirt never really ended. It just blended in and merged with her belly. When I say she was unaccomplished, she really was. I think she did ice skating for a while until she snapped her skates. After that, she went to swimming, but she gave up when she didn't win a medal in the first tournament. Then she took up baking, which she still does to this day. However, something was always wrong with them. It was like she'd had a whole bag of cheese puffs and had to squirt it out in her washroom. Then, without turning on the fan, she baked the cookies over the steamy toilet. I didn't eat any, even when she got abusive towards me about it. See, she wasn't just a bite narcissist, she was also a genuine abuser. We'll get to why she strangled me later on, but for cookies she'd usually just kick you. She'd kick you in the shins if you were standing, the hands if you were sitting down. She'd also throw things at people when she got stressed. I can remember her throwing pens and binders at anyone who was trying to help calm her down. I only saw her house once. Her parents were nice enough, pretty standard picket fence family, 2 floors, 6 rooms or whatever. She had a brother. He seems way better than she was. But then we get to her room, and I don't think I've ever been in a creepier place. See, it's one thing to have piss bottles, gamer setup, yeah, the Mountain Dew, the wrappers on the ground. But it's another thing to have pictures of your current crushes pasted to the walls. The floors were mostly wrappers and discarded clothing. Not the worst neckbeardness, but definitely not where I wanted to spend the night sleeping. I actually left early because I couldn't stand the mess and all the boys staring at me from the wall. Those who stayed said she was demanding and only let people play what she wanted them to play. They played Monopoly even after everyone else was tired of it. She changed the rules in order to help herself win. Now, the obvious question is why she was in our friend group. It goes back to the main character trait of the story. I was not the only one who was bullied in elementary school. All of us were. So everyone knew what it meant to be excluded, and everyone knew standing up to her temporarily would only increase the torment. But getting rid of her just meant pushing her onto other people who may fall victim to her crimes. Like we did, or she might have no one, which none of us wanted to do. We wanted her to have a social, just because we knew what it meant to be alone. And of course, like most middle schoolers, we let her get away with way too much. But at least she wasn't excluded from anything like she constantly did to me. The first memory of her I have is in 7th grade, and we had to do a group project. Now, for obvious reasons, I'm used to working alone, but she begged me over and over and over to do the project with her. She would come over and sit beside me and kick me under the table every time I said no. She'd lied that she'd left her books at home so she could take mine. She just drew shitty anime drawings all over my notes when I lent them to her. Not lending them led to her kicking sometimes, but usually she'd run off crying into the hallways. Then when you left class, she'd yell at you for making her fail the class. Eventually I had to give in. It was the stupidest project I'd ever been given. You had to design an adventure with your partner. For example, we chose canoeing down the river for 2 weeks. She wrote fan fiction, so I gave her the task of writing our adventures down in the journalistic style we were told about. And I did everything else. I did everything because she went on and on about how difficult her part was going to be, and that would take forever. So I agreed because, whatever, I would have done it on my own anyways if she didn't kick me into doing it with her. The first issue is that she constantly yelled at me and kicked me for not completing my parts quickly enough. She needed to see the rivers we were taking and the supplies we had brought with us, which of course were my jobs, before she could start her part of the project. Fair enough, fair enough. I did all my work in 2 of the 7 days we were given. And then all I had left to do was the map. The teacher was mad at me because Brianne had constantly complained about me not supporting my group members. But she got even more mad when my answer to what I was working on became just the last part of the map for 5 days. I really just had to draw a squiggly line in MS Paint over a picture of a river. I kept overcomplicating it just to try and get her off of my ass, but eventually she told me I had to edit Brianne's writing since I wasn't balancing the work well enough among group members. Now, the thing to remember is I'd never actually read Brianne's fanfictions. I'd simply heard her brag about them constantly. She won an award on some stupid One Direction smut site, and she reminded everyone about that nearly every day. Therefore, I just assumed she'd be a good writer. Again, this was 7th grade, and I'm a million times better than I was at that age. And that's because I practiced during it, even if it was bad. However, her work was especially terrible. I could have hired a Chinese man off Fiverr to be my partner and he would have done a better job. I think in 5 paragraphs she used 1 period. It was so bad I couldn't even tell what was going on. It wasn't even written in chronological order. And here OP gave an example of what was written. And I'll try and do her shitty voice. Today was the day we escaped the bear. We ran into the canoe before it got us, but we got breakfast of salmon and eggs and we kept battling. Then we remembered we forgot our tents and went. The bear was eating our tents and screamed and ran into the water as Sarah was dumb and started paddling towards it, but my IQ's super good, so I pulled out sunscreen canister and pointed it at Bear. Bear dies and we get tense. Sarah's crying, but I am strong. Then we went to bed night, but before night bed we took Bear and made burial kayak out of sand and buried it. And before that we packed up the tents and floated down the stream to the next campsite. We had bagels for dinner and fresh caught fish before we met the bear for lunch. The cooler was warm, so we put in the water behind the canoes. And it was my job to edit it. I knew how to edit from that age. I put comments on what I found confusing and how I thought she could improve her work. I went over to tell her about it. Since she was just browsing Tumblr, I thought it was okay to interrupt. She was not happy that I didn't immediately love her writing. She started crying and punched me in the stomach. She got sent to the office, but the teacher told me to do the editing since nobody else was even there to do it now. Now, after all that, after another 3 or 4 days of editing and doing all the rest of the project, you can probably imagine who hasn't done their half of the work. She wasn't finished her half of the project and threatened me if I didn't do it, so I did it. I wrote the entire project that night. But it gets worse because I had to present the entire project as well. In all fairness, I think her stage fright is the least annoying of her qualities. I truly understand that speaking in front of an audience is difficult, but I don't have much of a problem with it, so I presented it. But I did it in a way that I kept looking at her to present the part if she wanted to. And here I give another example. In our cooler, we brought food that had to stay cold. We brought apples, bread, eggs, and milk. And in my opinion, it was a fairly good presentation given the circumstances. But of course she hated at it. She yelled at me because I kept looking at her and it made her self-conscious, and she couldn't even present anything because I didn't leave her any time to do so. But of course the teacher gave her a bad mark on the presentation part, since she didn't actually say anything. And this was my fault, obviously. And Brianne went around telling everyone how I ruined her marks and that I was selfish for doing so. So that's part 1 of the story of Legbeard Brianne. I'm not even halfway through it, so we might have to turn this into a 3-parter. But yeah, it's a fun story. She gets a lot worse, but I think it's good to have the basics, and there's also, call back to it later on. So I hope everybody's having a lovely evening, and take very good care of yourselves.